Can you hear me? Okay. How's that?
All right, so we'll all just remember to speak directly into the microphones as loudly as we can.
Okay. Welcome to the public hearing and public meeting of August 10th, 2021, the Landmarks Preservation Commission. Chair Carroll. Here. Commissioner Bland. Commissioner Chapin. Here. Commissioner Chen. Here. Commissioner Devonshire. Commissioner Groblum. Here. Commissioner Gustafson. Here. Commissioner Jefferson. Here. Commissioner Holford Smith. Here. Commissioner Shamir Bergen. Commissioner Lutfi.
Thank you and good morning and welcome to the August 10th Landmarks Preservation Commission public hearing and public meeting. We have a little bit of everything today. We're going to start the morning with a public meeting to review 2 items proposed by the research department for calendaring. And then we'll move to the public hearing and public meeting to review applications for work on designated properties. And so with that, I'm going to turn it to Caitlin McHale, our Director of Research. Thanks, Sarah.
And actually, I'll go ahead and read in the items for research today. So for the research department public meeting agenda, we read in 2 items which will be presented together. The first is item 1, LP 2655, the proposed Cambria Heights 222nd Street Historic District. This is an item proposed for the commission's calendar with the boundary as described in the agenda and as will be shown on the slides. And item 2, LP 2656. This is the proposed Cambria Heights 227th Street Historic District in the Borough of Queens. Both are in the Borough of Queens. This is also an item proposed for the commission's calendar with the boundary as described in the agenda and shown in the presentation slides. And with that, I will turn it over to Kate.
Thank you. Can you hear me? A little louder. I might just do the. How's that? Okay. Good morning, commissioners. I'm Caitlin McHale, Director of Research. More louder.
Air conditioning and a mess.
The proposed Cambria Heights, 222nd Street and 227th Street historic districts contain 96 row houses facing each other along 2 blocks of the Cambria Heights neighborhood of southeastern Queens. Built in 1931 to 32, they comprise 2 remarkably cohesive and intact groups of Tudor Revival row houses, incorporating elements of the storybook style. The proposed Cambria Heights 222nd Street Historic District contains 46 row houses between 115th Road and 116th Avenue. It was developed by a company called Selective Homes Incorporated. 5 blocks away, the proposed Cambria Heights 227th Street Historic District contains 50 houses between 116th Avenue and Linden Boulevard. It was developed by the company St. Albans Lawns Incorporated, affiliated with the Queens developer Wallasoff Brothers. These 2 blocks are identified as part of a survey undertaken by the research department in 2019 to identify meritorious examples of Queens row house development built in the 1920s and 30s, as residential development was spreading outward through the borough with the advent of the automobile. Both 222nd and 227th Streets stood out as very distinctive, both in comparison to other examples of this type of row house development in Queens and within its neighborhood in general. The historic character of each block is largely intact with a clear and strong sense of place. Focusing on these streets in Cambria Heights fits within LPC's equity framework as we seek to increase designations in communities not well represented by landmarks and to better tell the story of all New Yorkers. A predominantly African-American and Afro-Caribbean community, Cambria Heights has no designated landmarks and was in a large section of eastern Queens with few landmarks or historic districts. Closest is the historic African-American community of Addisley Park, which was designated in 2011. The 2 proposed districts clearly stand out within their larger neighborhood for their architectural, significance as particularly innovative and imaginative use of what we have defined as the storybook style and their highly intact historic character. The surrounding blocks do not share their distinctiveness, integrity, or strong sense of place. Located in southeastern Queens, the Cambria Heights neighborhood is generally bounded by Murdoch Avenue to the north, Springfield and Francis Lewis Boulevards on the west, 121st Avenue on the south, and the Queens-Nassau County border to the east. The purple outlines show the locations of the proposed historic districts in the heart of the neighborhood. As this 1926 Sanborn map shows, the name Cambria Heights was in use by that time, although its origins are unclear. Into the 1890s, this area was part of the old town of Jamaica, located far from existing train lines between Queens Village to its north and the small village of Springfield to its south. The area remained rural well into the 20th century. Before it was known as Cambria Heights, the area was typically described as being part of St. Albans, Hollis, or Springfield. This 1918 map shows the area with a proposed street grid that was later abandoned. The purple outlines show the proposed districts near Linden Boulevard. In 1924, the area surrounding the proposed districts remained farmland. There was little desire to develop an area so far removed from the railroads and other mass transit. That changed, however, as infrastructure investment shifted away from railroads and streetcars toward highways and other facilities for the automobile. By the late 1920s, Robert Moses's extensive Long Island Parkway network was taking shape, including the Southern State Parkway by 1927. By 1930, a new parkway network was underway in Queens, including the nearby Belt and Cross Island parkways. Despite the Depression, thousands of homes were under construction or nearing completion in southeastern Queens at that time. Quote, "There is a reason for this remarkable growth," end quote, one developer stated in 1930. "It is simply an expression on the part of the people of New York City that they still love trees and lawns and sunshine." In planning 222nd and 227th Streets for both residents and their automobiles, builders adopted a model first widely used in the mid-1920s in Jackson Heights. Here, driveways behind the houses provided access to rear garages, relegating automobiles to the interior of the block and allowing for continuous landscaped front gardens. Following this model, both proposed districts were developed with row houses sharing common rear driveways, providing access to private rear garages or basement garages within the houses, and continuous front yards. The effect is especially striking on 227th Street, shown here, where the front gardens remain almost completely interrupted. In promoting these houses, their developer noted the importance of personal garages to prospective buyers. The Brooklyn Times-Union agreed, calling the automobile, quote, "an almost indispensable part of every household," and the garaging of a car a vital element in the whole question of housing. The architects of 222nd and 227th Streets combine the Tudor Revival style with what has come to be known in recent years as the storybook style. Primarily associated with freestanding houses, the Tudor Revival was adapted for row houses by the early 1910s in Queens and Brooklyn, including in the designated Chester Court Historic District shown here. The storybook style took root after the Tudor Revival during the 1920s. Drawing upon medieval and arts and crafts traditions, as well as fantasy architecture, the storybook may have been seen as an expressive variant of the Tudor Revival or as a style of its own. Originating in California in the 1920s, the storybook style merged medieval precedents with fairy tale illustrations and the aesthetics of Hollywood, the embodiment of glamour, fantasy, and romance. The fanciful adaptation of traditional Tudor elements, use of bright colors and exaggerated curving forms, and ornament with a playfully pasted on appearance are all characteristic of the storybook style. On 227th Street, the vertically stretched entrance vestibules with flared eaves, half timbering, jerkin head roofs, coraled windows, and stucco fields with randomly laid brick and stone accents are typical of the storybook style. So too are the brightly colored slate shingles with ragged edges implying great age. Storybook features of the 222nd Street houses shown here include their Tudor arched window openings, brightly colored terracotta roofs, brick facades with capriciously placed stone accents, and whimsically decorated chimneys with patterned brick and stucco panels. The flat facade and pasted on quality of the gables give the street a stage set quality, consistent with the storybook style of a Hollywood backdrop or a fairy tale illustration come to life. Both the 222nd and 227th Street developments were started in the spring of 1931 and began selling by the fall. Although 222nd Street does not appear to have been heavily advertised, 227th Street was promoted in the Brooklyn Eagle and other newspapers as St. Albans Lawns. Advertisements noted the house's location on the gateway to the Southern State Parkway with easy access to recreational sites in Queens and Nassau County. The attractive pricing included a private garage and was in keeping with the Wallasoff brothers' intention that, quote, the salaried man earning $50 a week can buy a house with as little financial effort as would be involved in paying rent, especially given the savings in garage fees. The location was described as St. Albans, Long Island, emphasizing its suburban setting. Initially, residents of both 222nd and 227th Streets were white middle-class families, with the men employed as firefighters, police officers, train operators, mechanics, clerks, and milkmen, among other occupations. Black families began moving to Cambria Heights by the 1950s, often overcoming opposition, even overt hostility, from some white residents and real estate brokers. By the 1980s, they were joined by immigrant families from Caribbean countries such as Jamaica, Haiti, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, and Barbados. Today, Cambria Heights remains one of several prosperous, predominantly Black residential communities in southeastern Queens. Although storybook row houses were built throughout Queens in the 1920s, the proposed historic districts stand out for their remarkable integrity and cohesiveness. Built by a single developer, Selective Homes, in 1931-2, both sides of the proposed Cambria Heights 222nd Street Historic District share the same Tudor Revival storybook style. Both sides of the street are exceptionally well preserved. The vast majority of the 46 houses in the proposed district have high integrity, with many retaining their historic wood entrance doors and first-story windows with a cheerful pastel-colored diamond panes, a signature storybook feature. Although almost all the front gardens remain intact and landscaped, about a quarter have brick and iron fences similar to those shown on the right on the slide, which slightly break up their continuity and visibility from the street. Even with these changes, this street stands out among Queens row houses of the era for its unusually whimsical design, especially visible in its brick and stucco chimneys, no two of which are alike. Moving to 227th Street, the proposed historic district was also entirely built by a single developer in 1931-32 in the Tudor Revival or storybook style. The proposed 227th Street Historic District is highly intact, with no notable changes to any of its 50 houses. Many of the houses retain their historic doors and sashes, including large first-story wood windows with brightly colored diamond panes. Today, the striking architecture of both the proposed 222nd Street and 227th Street historic districts remains remarkably intact, with their fanciful designs combining Tudor Revival and storybook influences. These two streets are among the architectural highlights of the Cambria Heights neighborhood and southeastern Queens. The research department recommends the commission vote to calendar these sections of 222nd and 227th Streets in Cambria Heights for consideration as New York City historic districts. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Do we have any questions?
Yeah,
John?
are there are garages behind each of these houses, right? Are the garages included in the historic district?
Yeah, the garages are, the district includes the entire lot of the whole row.
Is that, what's the condition of those garages? I know we've seen some districts where the houses are very uniform and then the garages are a chocolate mess. So what are we dealing with there in terms of the garages?
That, we know the garages were built at the same time of the houses, but we're still in the process of analyzing their current condition. And it's not really a public way, so we're kind of working with what we can to get there. But from what we can see, they're rather simple. But we do, there are some changes back there. So that will all be documented for the time of designation.
Do we have a preliminary view or understanding of community support?
Yeah, we had a meeting via Zoom in the community, and we have started to get some support. We're still working to make sure, we can talk to a lot of people. It was a small meeting, but we have had some support, and also with the council member is supportive of these as well.
Who is the council member?
It's Danique Miller.
Thank you.
Are there questions? Yes, Commissioner Polk.
A couple of things. I mean, this is great, very fun. Upper story windows were originally wood 6/1 or 6/6 uniformly, or we have, I mean, the photo, the tax photo wasn't clear.
Right, yeah, there was a bit of a range, I believe, and we're still in the process of finalizing kind of our building by building descriptions and analyzing those changes.
Okay.
But there have been some replacements of windows, but a lot we saw were 6/1.
Okay. The fence thing, you mentioned about a quarter have fences.
Yep.
I would suggest that we, in the course of developing the report or the designation, that we talk a little bit about the fencing, and try to kind of suggest a policy, because it's come up so often in Queens before in these kind of districts.
Yeah.
And the same thing with, and the last question is, for a district so small, we ought to be able to plaster this place with notices in some ways that we don't have the problem we've had in other districts with, oh, I didn't know this was a district, I didn't know what the rules were, kind of thing. Do you have any thoughts on how to, I guess through the public meetings, right?
Yeah, with public meetings and as much as we can talk with people through the designation process, so everyone understands the responsibilities.
I mean, this is a district that you could literally leaflet the whole thing with,
Yeah,
and still have paper left over.
yeah. And I think some of that happens with some of the older districts where originally it wasn't attached to the title, and then over time was added. And I think newer districts were doing so much outreach and education anyway. It sort of happens, I think,
We did
that more in districts where there hasn't been as much outreach.
Yeah.
So we're also trying to go back and do more meetings in districts that have been designated in the past to just kind of remind them of the responsibilities.
Which is great. I'm just thinking, like the recent scofflaw appearances here have been from. I remember one from Ridgewood and or a couple from Ridgewood and a couple from Adderley Park.
Yeah.
So
And-
it's just a culture shift. It's a big culture shift.
Yeah.
So
We've been working actively in both of those districts,
Yeah.
particularly Ridgewood, because it does seem to be
it's hot.
there's more work happening without permits than there is with permits. And so we've tried numerous times to work through the council member and the community board
It's hard.
to get out there and get people and have people talk to us. And
Need to hire a sandwich board person just to kind of
Yeah.
walk the streets, bell.
But people have obviously taken very, very good care of these houses over the years, so it's really wonderful to find these blocks in this kind of condition.
But interestingly, it's often in those kind of blocks where you get some pushback. That's, I've been here for 50 years.
Right.
You know better.
Okay, other questions? No. Okay, well, I'm really delighted that we're bringing these forward today. We, as Kate said, we started this work in 2019. And really, Councilmember Miller's office asked us to look at his district. And as a Queens resident myself, I was really interested in finding potential landmarks in Queens. And so under Kate's leadership, the research team undertook a big survey to understand the row house development in Queens, because we do have some historic districts in Queens of the brick row house type. But really, when you look at the majority of our districts, so many of them are brownstone brick and brick early row houses and brownstone row houses that all date to the 19th century. And at this point, these buildings are as old or even older than some of those districts when we designated them. So I think we needed to kind of do some work that hadn't been done in the past and look at it through a new lens that time and perspective gives us. And so the research team, led by our senior historian, Michael Karatzis, did a deep study into the Tudor revival style and identified the storybook iteration of the style, and really looked at large areas of Queens to understand how the style was applied, and found that they're not all equal. It's not equally applied everywhere. And so we did identify these two streets in this particular neighborhood, as well as some other areas where this storybook style was really used in a very creative and innovative way. So I'm just so excited that this large study that the research team did has yielding these two proposals today. So I would definitely recommend that we move to calendar them.
Yeah, likewise, yeah.
Great.
The world is really large, the Queens is almost the fifth largest city in the US, almost the size of Houston. So you've got quite a bit of inventory to check out yet. I mean, it's really literally very, very large district.
This is really a really fine example. The houses are in such good condition, and just a really kind of unique piece of New York that most people aren't familiar with this particular style and its eclectic nature. So I think it's great.
That's great. Good. Okay. So would you make I'll ask my other two Queens residents to make the two motions. You just need to make a motion to calendar the 220. So you can do the 222nd Street one.
Okay, like to move to calendar the item number LP 2655, Cambria Heights 222nd Street Historic District, as well as the LP 2656, Cambria Heights 227th Street Historic District in Borough, Queens, in Community Board District number 13.
Okay, and Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
Okay, and then we'll vote on them each separately. So on the Cambria Heights 222nd Street Historic District proposed, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. And then for the Cambria Heights 227th Street Historic District proposed, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so both of those are currently now calendared for consideration, and we hope to have a public hearing in the very near future. Thank you.
Okay, we're now going to move to the Preservation Department agenda, beginning with public hearing item number 1, LPC 21-09251, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, lot 1981, lot 35, 122 Gates Avenue in the Clinton Hill Historic District. This is an Italian-style row house designed by Effingham Nichols and John W. Gregory and built in circa 1863, and the application is to construct a rear yard addition.
Good morning. My name is William Augustino. Is this microphone? Can you hear me? I'm presenting the application for a two-story rear yard extension to 122 Gates Avenue in Brooklyn. The proposed extension received unanimous support from the Brooklyn Community Board too, and a letter of support from the neighborhood organization Citizens for Responsible Neighborhood Planning of Clinton Hill. The middle photograph here is the historic tax photo from the 1940s, and the photograph on the right is the current front facade. The proposed extension of indicated in this block diagram in blue on the left-hand side. The extension will be partly visible from Cambridge Place, which is the road that runs along the bottom of the diagram. This block has several existing 2- and 3-story rear yard extensions. These are indicated in this diagram in green and cyan. There's also a previously approved 4-story plus 2-story extension at 404 Grand Avenue that is visible, also visible from Cambridge Place. This is a 3-dimensional view at the end of the block at the corner of Gates and Cambridge. The proposed extension at 122 Gates is there in blue. And there are other 2 existing 2- and 3-story extensions that are visible from Cambridge Place. One is an existing 3-story extension at 118 Gates. This is the corner building in the front part of the diagram, lower left-hand corner. On the other side of 122 Gates, the building at 126 also has an existing 3-story extension. That's the one with the smaller 2-story extension in green off of it. And all of the existing decks are indicated in yellow. This is a rotated view at the same end of the block looking towards Cambridge Place. The extension again at 122 Gates is shown in blue. And it's flanked by the larger 3-story extensions at 118 and 126. The existing rear elevation of 122 Gates shows a wood deck that will be removed. And there's also an adjacent wood deck at 120 Gates on the left-hand side. And there are 3-story extensions at both sides, again, at 118 and 126. 118 is a corner building, it's all the way on the left side of the drawing. And the tall extension at 126 is on the right side of this drawing. The proposed rear extension of 122 Gates has 2 stories in brick to match the existing rear facade of the main building. There are painted steel windows and a painted metal deck with a stair down to the yards. There's also a painted steel railing at the roof terrace, which is on top of the proposed extension. And the upper part of the drawing here is a partial elevation at the main facade of the facade of the main building, so cut through the roof terrace looking at the facade. And the existing windows at the 2nd and 3rd floor will remain. And the middle window on the 2nd floor will be changed to provide a door for access to the terrace. Here, the existing plan on the left shows the wood deck that will be removed. In the middle of the plan shows the proposed extension at 11'7" deep, and new deck and stair off of that to the rear yard. In the 2nd floor plan on the right, the new roof terrace is accessed from a central door and will have a railing that wraps on 3 sides. The existing section on the left shows the extent of the wood deck that will be removed. And the proposed section on the right shows the extension at 122 Gates has a similar depth to 118 Gates, which is indicated here with a blue dashed line. And 122 is 1 story smaller. The existing extension at 126 Gates is much larger, and it's also indicated with a blue dashed line, which is at the top of the drawing. This photo is the existing view into the block from Cambridge Place. It was taken in the fall. And right now, this same view is partly obstructed by tree foliage. And the extension at 118 Gates is here in the foreground. And the larger extension at 126 Gates can be seen beyond. Here we have the same view with a rendering of the proposed extension. Again, the extension will have brick on 3 sides to match the existing back wall of the main house. And there will be a railing at the roof terrace that wraps 3 sides. This is a photo montage of the current view from the rear yard. The wood deck shown here will be removed, and there's an adjacent wood deck there at 120. And the existing 3-story extensions are at 118 on the left side of the photo and 126 Gates on the right side. This is the same view with the rendering of the proposed extension. There are painted steel windows and doors and a painted metal deck with a stair down to the yard. Again, we see the existing windows on the 2nd and 3rd floors will remain, and the middle window on the 2nd floor will be changed for a door for access to the terrace. This concludes the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Okay, we'll take public testimony when we have questions after that. And as always, I'll start with anyone who signed up in advance and then get to anyone else who's here. So Christabel Goff.
Christabel Goff, and I'm reading for the Victorian Society in New York, who couldn't be here this morning. Founded in New York City in 1966, the Victorian Society in America is dedicated to fostering the appreciation and preservation of our 19th and early 20th century heritage. The NY chapter promotes preservation of our historic districts, individual landmarks, interiors, and civic art. The existence of 2 early rear yard extensions on the block, both fully visible from Cambridge Place, leads us to suggest that the proposed addition, also fully visible, can, with modifications, fit comfortably into this block without detracting from the character of the district, nor of the visible block interior. We recommend that the block bulk be at least slightly reduced, especially as it manifests on the severe blank side walls. We also urge the use of traditional, smaller punched window openings, preferably with arched brick lintels, as seen at practically every other rear-facing window, to allow this addition to fit more harmoniously into its surroundings and not call attention to itself. Thank you. You received that, I think.
Yes, we did receive that, and that was distributed to the commissioners in advance of today as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? Okay, and I'll just note for the record that Brooklyn Community Board 2 unanimously voted to approve this application as presented.
Would you like to respond to
Thank
the
you.
comments?
Yes, we did look at some of those issues with the community board, especially prior to the meeting. We met with 3 different, through Zoom, we met with 3 different community organizations. And We did make some modifications to the original design. The parapet wall was slightly higher than this. We reduced that to reduce the bulk. And in our view that this is much smaller than all the, as you can see on the left-hand side, that is a much larger extension with a taller railing at the top. And on the right-hand side, it's very large extension. So we feel that the size of this is appropriate for the location.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any final questions? Okay, let's have Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Chan. Would you second that?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. An applicant is proposing two-story rear yard addition, and it is within a group where there are some larger additions, and this is visible through the side yard. Commissioner Gustafson, would you like to start this one?
Sure, and this will be brief. I think the height, the depth, the massing, the materials are all sympathetic with extensions that already exist. I think the entire thing is appropriate. I hear the Victorian Society's comment about the type of windows, but we've frequently approved windows of this nature in the past. I would note that I appreciate the applicant's presentation. 8 minutes from start to finish, completely targeted on the issues that we would be concerned about. Clear renditions, a limited number of slides, giving us maximum visibility of the extension. So instead of giving us a picture where he's hiding behind the trees, he showed us exactly how it's going to look, and that's what we need to see. And I very much appreciate that. So thank you.
All right, great. Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
I agree. I think the proportion of the block of the addition is perfect. My only issue is over time, I'm beginning to wonder about the amount of glass that we see exposed, because in this particular picture, photo, you see how powerful it is in relationship to the context of it. And somehow it becomes a contrast with the rest of the building. So how much glass can you put back there and accept in relationship to the context is a question for me.
Yeah, and I understand that. I think we do have a long history of approving the sort of double height openings, particularly at the basement and parlor floor. I think, and at two-story rear extensions, I think sort of maybe some of us with T-porches in our mind and sort of more open or glassy or even just transparent because they're open double height structures. And so I think that's part of the reason that we've gotten comfortable with this type of configuration. Commissioner Chan?
Yeah, I share the colleagues' comments. I think that the applicant did not hide anything. I think it's shown as it is. I think this is traditionally very similar to a lot of projects we approve. So I think it appropriate.
Commissioner Goldblum?
Agreed. It's in, I was just thinking that this 50 years from now, there will be, just like there's a storybook style, there will be an LPC backyard edition style. And this will be an exemplar of that style. Appropriate.
Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I think it's a modest addition in the context, and the top two floors are preserved, which I think is great. It's very typical, as others have stated, of what we've often approved before. And really the only issue here, I think, is the visibility from the side. But in this, from the back, but side view, I think in this case, the small row that exists here has already been interrupted on the lower floors. So while if it hadn't been, I might say have a little more brick and included to break up the windows, but I think given the context that this really is appropriate in this case.
Thank you, Commissioner Holford Smith.
I think it's a modest addition, and it falls in line with what we typically approve for a house like this, so I find it appropriate.
All right, great. Thank you. So I think
We have enough of us to go ahead and move forward with this. So Commissioner Gustafson, will you make the motion?
In the matter of LPC 21-09251, 122 Gates Avenue in the Clinton Hill Historic District, the application is to construct a rear yard addition. I note that the building's scale, style, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Clinton Hill Historic District. I recommend approval, noting that the proposed work will not eliminate or damage any significant architectural features, that the upper floor of the rear addition and deck will be visible from a public thoroughfare over rear yards within the context of other visible rear additions and secondary facades, that the addition will not rise to the full height of the rear facade and the top floor will be retained, thereby preserving the building's relationship to others in the row, that the depth of the parlor floor addition and associated deck will be consistent with the depth of other rear additions found within the central green space, and that the brick-clad rear addition featuring a large masonry opening with multi-light window and door assembly will feature a level of articulation, materials palette, and ratio of solid to void that is consistent with other rear additions found at other buildings of this type within this historic district.
Commissioner Hopper Smith, would you second the motion?
I second it.
Thank you. And John, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen. Aye. Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Holzer Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
7 in favor, none opposed. The motion carries.
That's
Thank you
approved.
very much.
Thank you. And we'll move to the next item.
The next item is number 2, LPC 21-02724, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, block 1096, lot 67, 415 12th Street in the Park Slope Historic District Extension. This is a neo-Gothic style row house built circa 1878 to 80, and the application is to construct rooftop and rear yard additions, replace windows, and extend chimneys.
Good morning. My name is Shai Fuller, and I'm here from Ben Herzog Architect. I'm presenting 415 12th Street, Brooklyn. And I'd like to start with a statement from the owners. We would like to thank the LPC for their time and consideration today. We are very happy when our block had landmark status declared in 2012. We are long-term residents, having bought our house in 1995, long before the block was landmarked. And when we redid our stoop and front doors, it was prior to our block being landmarked. However, we always kept in mind what we believed was the historical integrity of the building. If you look at our house compared to those immediately adjacent on either side, with great pride, we'd like to believe we have the nicest stoop and doors, all accomplished prior to our block receiving landmark status. We'd like to have the LPC take into account not only the building's historical context and features, but also the evolution of building materials and products. The front windows you've selected are consistent with other federal brick row houses and brownstones within the South Slope landmarked blocks. As far as we can tell, recent renovation projects that have DOB permits and those that do not in the South Slope landmark district are consistent with the windows we've chosen. We believe the future cost of maintaining wood windows would be an undue burden. We look forward to exposing the original brick on the rear facade. If that is not possible due to the years they've been covered by thorough seal, we would like to have a single consistent look of breathable coating. Thank you again for your time, and we look forward to a positive outcome. Sincerely, Tracy Hughes and Carlos Velez, proud fourth owners of 415 12th Street. So today the scope that we're covering is new rear and roof additions and new windows throughout. So this is a brick townhouse with a brownstone stoop built circa 1878 to 1880. And you can see the original cornice remains. There have been some changes since that 1940s tax photo, new windows, the new door that the owners mentioned in their statement, a refurbished stoop and railings. The block on 12th Street between 7th and 8th Avenue, this is in Park Slope, Brooklyn, is fairly eclectic. There's a series of 4 townhouses, one to the left, to the right, that are fairly similar. and then 3 more further down the block, which are similar but another story high. Otherwise, there are a bunch of apartment buildings, larger apartment buildings, as well as a parking garage. And across the street is the Farmer and Sonia Watch Factory, which is now condominiums. There are a couple of additions already on the block, including an existing addition at this house. Here's a photo of the adjacent buildings, which you can see are similar to ours, 415 12th Street here in the center. And what we are proposing on the front facade are new aluminum clad wood windows and a new roof addition, which will be clad in zinc lead coated copper and there'll be black metal accents throughout. There will also be new AC units on the roof and chimney extensions, which are required to extend 3 feet above the roof addition roof. At the rear, the building is currently covered in thorough seal, which is a breathable coating on the brick. And there is an existing addition, which you can see at the basement level. The neighbors' rears are also covered in a breathable coating. And you can see here the mock-up that we did at the roof. So this is the roof addition mock-up. The rear addition on the basement and the first floor will be clad in a full bed veneer limestone. The detail is on the top right, and so it's a fairly thick veneer at 3 5/8 thick. The windows and the metal accents will be matte black. And then at the second floor, we're hoping to expose the brick, but understanding that that might be challenging due to the years it's been covered with the coating. We're going to do a test, and if that doesn't work out, we will clad it in the breathable coating, another layer of that. The roof addition in terms of materials are very similar to what we saw on the front with the zinc coated copper and the black metal accents. Here's an existing section showing the zoning envelope and the existing rear addition. And the new rear addition, which is slightly set back from the existing addition, but with an additional floor and a shallow deck at the first floor. And you can see here the roof addition as well, which sits within the view angle from across the street, and the chimney extensions, which we had originally mocked up and had shown to the community board as masonry going all the way up. And we have since then reduced the visibility greatly by bringing the masonry down to below the view angle and extending the flue up, painting it matte black and shifting it within the masonry chimney as much as possible to be close to the roof extension. Some existing and proposed plans. Here you can see that existing rear addition and the proposed rear addition in plan. Again, with the deck at the rear. The second floor and the third floor. We built a roof mock-up in orange netting. So here's the view of the mock-up from the roof, and the guardrail mock-up is on the left, and rendering from the rear. And then some views from around the neighborhood. So again, this mock-up has the masonry going all the way up, so it'll be less visible when we do the extension with the flue. So in blue in the diagram on the bottom left, those are the views from which you can only see the chimneys, the chimney extension, and the top of the railing. The roof addition is minimally visible from number 5 in purple when you cross 7th Avenue and go diagonally down the intersection, which you can see in this view number 5 here. And just to note that there is a vernacular of exposed masonry chimneys and flues throughout the block. And then, yeah, so here are the views from across the street. And then it is not visible from 11th Street in the green here. As for the windows, we're proposing replacing the existing black aluminum windows with black aluminum clad windows, 1/1 per what is existing. And then we are proposing a new aluminum brick mold to match the existing. So we exposed the original wood brick mold here, measured it, and found one that matches it closely. And some images of the adjacent townhouses with their existing windows. There's a great diversity of types of windows right now, 1/1, 6/6, 4/4, 2/2. And then the original was 2/2, but we did find down the block they had 1/1, a couple of doors down, and a couple of roof accretions around the neighborhood as well. Thank you for your time. I look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes, Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I have a couple. One is just, are there other rooftop additions on the block?
There are not.
Thank you. Okay, so the second one is, can the chimney extensions, you spoke about quite a bit about, your attempt to minimize the flues and can they be shifted back or any further than they have been in terms of, and how much visibility is there at this point? Because you said that the mock-up is not reflective of how visible they are.
Right. I should have thrown a dimension on there. So they could be shifted back. However, they would still be visible if you see in the diagram there. You can only shift it back about 1 foot. And so you would still have visibility. I think that right now it's about 5 feet is visible and you would get to something like 4 feet. So there is some improvement in the visibility. However, it is still visible and it may require a little bit more structural support when it shifts over. So because it was still visible, we kept it kind of as far inside the masonry chimney as possible.
And that's from across the street, not from directly in the visibility.
Correct. That is from across the street.
Thank you.
So, and if you want to just actually go to your mock-up views, maybe you could just sort of highlight where the chimney, the brick would now stop and where the flue would start.
Right. So the flue would start basically where this is taken from across the street. And since we've brought the masonry down to the sight line, the flue would start basically where you see the cornice, the top of the cornice right now. So it would extend as such here. And then from this corner, you would see it here. You would probably see a little bit more masonry from this corner. So it would kind of come to here.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner
What's your
Vogel.
thinking on the limestone at the back and where does that come from? What's your intention?
This was a request from the owner. This was something that they saw in a building in the neighborhood, which had done, it wasn't a historical building. It was a new construction building, which had a limestone facade, which they really enjoyed and wanted to replicate on the rear facade.
So they saw a limestone facade in the backyard?
Not in the backyard.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Yeah, 2 questions. Did I hear you correctly saying that the 3rd floor has some kind of coating on it and you're going to remove it and bring it back to brick?
We're going to remove a portion of it and see how the brick survives. If the brick crumbles, then we won't try to remove the entirety of it. And it's right now pretty dirty and old, and we might try to do another coating. And ideally tint it closer to the color of the limestone below so that it reads as a more continuous facade.
So what's there now, stucco?
Right now, it's a breathable coating. So it's a similar type of coating that we're proposing.
And the second question, you can, the brick, the chimney, you can shift it back, angle it back if you have fan assist. Have you tried that? So in other words, you could angle it and then angle the chimney and go up with some kind of fan assist in the system. Have you ever thought of that to deal with the issue that you have?
So you're speaking about angling this chimney back? Something like this?
He's
Yes.
suggesting if you used an induction fan at the top of the flue, could you angle it back further than what's being proposed?
Yes, yes, that is possible. We spoke to a mechanical engineer and that is feasible.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, we'll move to public testimony and then we'll come back to you. Simeon Bankoff.
Good morning, Commissioners. Simeon Bancroft, Historic Districts Council. Actually, we have a lot of the same comments that we just brought up before. HDC finds this proposal to have several inappropriate components, starting with the rear yard addition. The choice of limestone as a facade treatment is peculiar, as limestone is not found anywhere else on this building. Using the material would encounter the general composition of this house. The rear addition should be clad in brick instead. Just out on a personal note, I have a row house in Park Slope, not that far from it. And it's, unfortunately painted on the back, but it's painted. It's still brick, reads as brick. In addition, the expansive glazing created by the two sets of sliding doors is excessive. We would recommend that the doors have divided lights as shown in slide LM15. Doing that would help break up the glassiness of the rear and provide more visual articulation. With regard to the rooftop addition, we believe it's vastly overdone in terms of bulk, which results in the visible thrust of chimneys appearing over the building, as mentioned in your comments. One of the most beautiful characteristics of this type of house is the unbroken cornice line with its neighbors, which is being disrupted by the proposed chimney extensions. Park Slope is not especially known for its variegated roofscape, especially on low-rise blocks, even on this one. We urge the LPC to instruct the applicant to make this addition truly invisible from the public way.
Thank you. Christabel Goff.
Christabel Goff, reading for the Victorian Society in New York. The Victorian Society in New York finds that the scale of both the rooftop additions and the rear yard addition are overwhelming to this small row house. The presentation's small pictures of the visibility of the rooftop addition from the public way are misleading, and they have submitted photos of a mock-up, which I didn't find the presentation clarified exactly what changes had been made, and I think that we could
I think
stick
that changed
with,
this morning.
yeah. Okay. We urge that the bulk, height, and visibility of the additions be substantially reduced. We also suggest that limestone is not an appropriate material for cladding the rear addition. This addition should be clad with materials typical of rear facades and matching the materials on this and adjacent buildings. Regarding the front elevation, we think the proposed work to the brownstone lintels and sills requires further investigation to determine whether these are currently painted and what exactly sanding entails, as aggressively sanding by mechanical means could damage the brownstone. Finally, we continue to advocate for wood windows and brick molds in the buildings of this age scale and type, despite the window rules. And note that the original brick molds do not seem to be in bad condition,
having just excessive paint buildup. Thank you. I hope we have clarified now the situation about the rooftop addition, because certainly the mock-up which the public saw was extremely disturbing. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. That is what was presented in the presentation today. She just verbally said that she made some changes to it. So we're trying to assess that. Yeah, we're trying to assess it. Okay, I think those are the only signups. And I'll note that in addition, Brooklyn Community Board 6 approved the application unanimously with the condition that all efforts are made to minimize the chimney and that air conditioning and the chimneys and air conditioning units visibility. And we also received 2 letters from the speakers who've already spoken. So would you like to respond to those comments? In particular, I think that there is some concern about understanding the visibility of the chimneys at this point.
Right, so the roof mock-ups were built before the community board hearing. And so the adjustments that we are making to the chimneys are per the conversations that we had with the community board. So that's why you're not seeing it reflected in the roof mock-up and the photos of the roof mock-up. However, we are showing the updates in the sections and the elevations.
All right, and I think you did sort of walk through the views to show where the brick would end. Any comments on on the use of limestone on the rear facade, or any of the other comments you'd like to address?
No other comments.
Okay, all right, any final questions? Okay, so I think we'll move to close our hearing and begin our discussion. Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Goldberg, would you second that?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Right, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And there are 3 components to this proposal. There are the windows on the front facade, which are before us today because they do not meet the original 2/2 configuration and they don't match the original material. And so those 2 items trigger commission review. And we're also looking at the rooftop addition and the rear yard addition. And as we've discussed, the rooftop addition, the chimneys are visible from several points along 12th Street. The side of the addition is visible across 7th Avenue, sort of through this window where you see it somewhat in the context of the building on which it sits. So Commissioner Jefferson, would you like to start this one?
Okay, let's start with the limestone. It's cladding. I think it's inappropriate. To change.
Just a little louder.
Louder. Let's start with the limestone. I think it should be, it's inappropriate in the backyard. That's 1. 2, the chimneys, I think, could be resolved if they put an inline fan and shifted it back somehow so it would not be visible from the street. I think the addition is fine. The volume of the addition is fine. And I do find the glass doors and the glass doors should add an additional vertical monument to just make them appear not as much glass.
And do you have any feelings about the 1/1 aluminum clad windows?
They're fine.
Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the chimney, I think the applicant did as much as they can by doing the foot. I don't think that extra 1 foot, unless the rest of the commissioners feel that is useful. So I would defer to them. I think the front facade, I think, is also need to be going back to restudy. I think that's that part of it I'm less comfortable with. And so I want to hear what the rest of the commissioner have to say.
Okay, Commissioner Goldblum.
I think the front windows should be 2x2/2. And I think that, the restoring of this block over time, or this row over time to its historic configuration would be beneficial to the district. I think that Everardo's thoughts about the chimney should be, I agree with them, and the applicant should work with the staff to get rid of the visibility or to minimize visibility of the chimneys. I find that the rooftop addition is unnecessarily tall. It's 10 feet, which probably has a 9-foot clear on the interior for a tiny room. And it seems like if there is some visibility and it can be addressed, I think the impact of the rooftop addition is most prominent on the rear facade, where it proportionally does loom over this rather petite, lovely little house. So I think that a reduction in height would be good. Similarly, I think that the comments about the amount of glass on the rear facade of the rooftop addition, for me, I translate those, I don't mind the amount of glass per se, but I think that the kind of, I think that the fact that they're so asymmetrically placed relative to what goes on below creates this feeling of disjunction between the building and the addition, which doesn't seem purposeful. It doesn't seem like they're trying to make a contrast or a relationship. I don't think one needs to be slavish about it, but I think that there could be a relationship between what's happening below and what's happening above, since they are rather close to each other, 3.5 feet. I think that the applicant should work with staff to redesign the rear facade of the addition to be more harmonious with what's happening below it. And I think that the limestone addition is peculiar and is overly grandiose. And we often do say to people, if we feel that the back is not back-ish enough, that it should be more like a modest rear facade. I personally don't think it's something that I would go to the mat on. I think it's just kind of a quirky, peculiar thing that I could possibly live with, but it is peculiar, and I do think it's worth note. If others feel more troubled by it, I would go either way.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
Okay, in the case of the windows, it's an opportunity to replace the windows on this row, and 202 is really not affecting your ability to see out. So I think, yes, we should ask them to do that with the windows. In the case of the rooftop, of course, the biggest issue, which they've done a lot to deal with, is the chimneys and the flues, and they should work with the staff further to see if they can decrease the visibility. Obviously, it's still going to be visible, I think. I don't think they can completely get rid of that. And I think that the size of the rear addition is appropriate to the context. But the materials are, as Commissioner Goldblum said, they're odd, and it would, I can't remember when I've seen one actually in that kind of material. So if they could work with the staff on a more appropriate material for the context. Also, Commissioners Goldblum's comments on the size of the rooftop and the maybe that the fenestration might make it a little less, more in context, that it could be brought more into context. It is the only rooftop addition, but I actually could go along with it, it being a rooftop addition and it being visible. But if we could work on a little bit, a few changes to make it a little more fit in a little bit better. I think that's it. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Hoffman-Smith?
I think that the combination of the rear addition and the rooftop addition really overwhelms this very small little building. I think that the rear addition massing is appropriate to what we typically approve. But I think that the rooftop addition is much too large and really does loom over the rear facade, as well as having the chimneys visible from certain vantage points. So I would ask that the rooftop addition be greatly reduced in height and pushed back from the rear. I think that the limestone cladding is very peculiar on a rear facade, and I think it should be brick or stucco. And the front facade, the windows, I think they should be returned to the 2/2. And at the minimum, that the brick mold should be wood. I prefer to have the windows be wood, but I don't know where we landed with that.
Okay, Commissioner Gustafson.
Yeah, oddly, with all these comments, I really don't think the applicant is terribly far from done here.
Yeah.
I agree with a lot of the comments I heard, but I hope they understand that this is not as radical as it seems. On the windows, I would go, it's 2/2. It's a very simple change. It's not very radical. So going back to the original 2/2, tweaking the chimney in whatever ways are possible I think is another simple one. I think that the applicant already has ideas in mind for how to accomplish that. They could simply work with the staff on that. To repeat Commissioner Goldblum's word, I think if you look at LMO8, you'll see what he meant by disjunctive. I think the building as is goes from a simple harmonious facade to that word, to a disjunctive one. And I think it's because there are three different materials as you rise up the building. As you get to the top, instead of the rooftop addition being in a diminutive position to the rest of the building, it seems to actually get larger as you go up. And I think that if that were reduced in height slightly, we had more consistent materials, at least on the addition and to match the brick on the building. I think you get there. So it sounds like a lot, but I really think it's not that far away.
Okay, great. Thank you all, commissioners. And I think as you said, Commissioner Gustafson, this is not that far away. And we do have a number of comments that are really adjustments to this proposal. So I think I'm going to go ahead and try to make a motion capturing all of those adjustments, and we will see where we are. Let me grab this.
Okay, in the matter of docket number LPC 2109-251-122 Gates Avenue in the Clinton Hill Historic District, an Italianate style row house designed by Effingham Nichols and John W. Gregory and built in 1863. This is an application to construct a rear yard addition. And I note that the building style, scale, materials, details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural.
Sorry. Sorry, thank you for catching that. It's LPC docket number 2102-724. 15 12th Street in the Park Slope Historic District Extension, a neo-brick style row house built circa 1878 to 80. This is an application to construct rooftop and rear yard additions, replace windows, and extend chimneys. And this building also with style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the architectural and historic character of the Park Slope Historic District Extension. And I recommend approval of modifications, finding that the proposed work will not eliminate or damage any significant architectural features. That the proposed windows at the primary facade will match the historic windows in terms of operation, details, and finish. That the proposed metal cladding in the windows will not be discernible from the public thoroughfare. That the proposed rooftop addition will be set back from the front and rear facades, and the rear addition will not rise to the full height of the building, thereby maintaining a sense of the building's original scale and massing. That the rooftop addition will only be visible from a public thoroughfare from a distance at oblique angles. And the rooftop addition will feature stucco and metal cladding, which will be in keeping with utilitarian rooftop elements at buildings of this type and age.
That the chimney extensions, we will make some recommendations so that it would be the minimum height required by building code and will be in keeping with chimneys found throughout the streetscape. And that the rear yard addition will not extend farther into the rear yard than the existing rear yard extension and will not diminish the presence of the rear yard or the central green space. And that the design of the proposed addition with separate openings at the basement and parlor floor will maintain the residential scale and character of the building. And that the rear addition will not be visible from any public thoroughfare. However, I note that the windows at the primary facade will not match the historic windows in terms of configuration, that the proposed chimney extensions will be highly visible over the primary facade against the sky, and that the addition, the combination of the additions in both their materials and size overwhelms the building. And so therefore I recommend that the application revise the proposal in consultation with the staff to include 2/2 double hung windows at the front facade, and we can explore a wood brick rolled. That the rooftop addition being reduced in height and pushed back from the rear facade. That the chimneys be pushed back and consider angling them to minimize their visibility, and that the materials of the rear yard addition be revised to better relate to the materials within the context. I got that. So Commissioner Hefford-Smith, would you second that motion?
I second it.
Okay, and John, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen. Aye. Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson. Aye. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
And Commissioner Jefferson. Aye. 7 in favor, none opposed, the motion carries.
So that's approved with those modifications. Please continue to work with the staff on those. Thank you. I'm going to move to the next item.
Or suggestions?
Yes, okay.
Okay, we're going to move now to item number 3, LPC 21-08229, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, Block 1221, Lot 18, 1180 Bergen Street, aka 777 St. Mark's Avenue in the Crown Heights North Historic District 2. This is a garage built circa 1880, and the application is to replace fencing and a gate.
Okay, and just before we begin, I'll note for the record that Commissioner Holford Smith is recused on this item. Please go ahead and state your name at the beginning of your presentation.
Hello, I'm Dana Konitzer, and I'm
Could you just speak a little louder also? Thanks.
I'm Dana Konitzer, presenting 1180 Bergen Street Gate replacement. It's located between New York Avenue and Brooklyn Avenue on Bergen Street. This is a montage of buildings in the area. As you can see, there's lots of brick. We wanted to bring that into our gate as well. The proposed gate replacement is quite similar to the general massing of the previous one. There's not much change other than that we have automated the gate and add a door so that residents in the area can access the lot. This is the existing condition. There is not much worth saving. It's in very poor condition. However, we did notice that there is brick underneath the height of E, and we did want to use the same color red brick in our future gate. So this is the proposal, which introduces brick piers and a standard metal gate in between. The height of the gate is 6'10" at the highest point to match the previous height of the existing gate. It shows a section of the brick piers and also a little more detail about how the gate will operate. There's a mechanical system that is located at the ground. It will not be visible from the street. And there's a new swing metal door. This is the precedent next door. It also includes brick piers, and this is what we use for inspiration. This fence is slightly lower than our gate. However, you can see that they used barbed wire to prevent intruders, and we did not want to use barbed wire. So we did want to keep ours a little bit higher. These are also precedents in the area. One is at 6 feet 5 inches, and the other is at 8 feet. So the only comment that we received from the community board was that they wanted us to lower the fence. However, we felt that the existing height that we are keeping to is the best height to keep the safety of the residents in mind.
Okay, all right. Is there any questions? Okay, so we'll move to testimony. And we don't have anyone who signed up for this item. Okay. So let me just note for the record that we did receive a resolution from Brooklyn Community Board 8, who the resolution says they approve the application provided the brick pillars be lowered at least 1 foot, but not the overall fence. And then the Crown Heights North Association also sent in a letter supporting the proposal, but also suggesting lowering the brick pillars. Okay, and do you want to, I know you said you didn't want to lower the fence, but the pillars, I don't know that they could be lowered much more without lowering the fence,
We
right?
did actually lower it a few inches, but now it's in line with.
Okay, so you actually did already lower the pillars. Got it. So you've already responded to those comments. Okay, any final questions, commissioners? No? Okay, so why don't we make a motion to close the hearing? Commissioner Gustafson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Commissioner Jefferson, would you second the motion? I second it. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion about this proposed fence at this lot. Commissioner Chan, would you like to start this one?
I think this is a very modest proposal, and I think given the context, I have no problem with it.
Thank you, Commissioner Goldblum.
I agree.
Commissioner Chapin.
I think it's completely appropriate and it's an improvement over the existing conditions.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
Agreed completely.
Okay,
Nicely done.
okay, all right. So Commissioner Chen, will you make the motion?
In a matter of LPC 21-08, 229, 1180 Bergen Street, AKA 777 St. Mark's Avenue, Crown Heights, North Historic District 2. The application is to replace fencing and the gate. I recommend approval that the work will not eliminate any significant architectural features, that the materials and finish of the piers and walls will match materials and finish at the other buildings on this lot, thereby helping to maintain the unified composition, that the height of the fencing and gates will be compatibly scaled to the bases of the surrounding buildings, and in keeping with other fences and gates as service yards and lots within this historic district, that the design will maintain a high level of transparency typical for lots and yards within this historic district, that the work will support the special architectural and historic character of the Crown Heights North Historic District 2.
And Commissioner Goldblum, will you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you.
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen. Aye. Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson. Aye. Commissioner Jefferson. Aye. 6 in favor, none opposed, motion carries.
All right, so that's approved. Thank you. And we'll move to the next item.
Okay, the next item is number 4, LPC 21-09652, application for certificate of appropriateness, number of Manhattan, block 1389, lot 12, 19 East 74th Street in the Upper East Side Historic District. This is an Italian-style residence built in 1869 and altered in a simplified neo-federal style by Schwartz and Gross in 1930. And the application is to replace windows and modify an opening. Please note this previously advertised the construction of a stair bulkhead, which was since determined to be eligible for staff level review.
Good morning, Commissioners. It's my pleasure to present this project. It's in the Upper East Side Historic District between Fifth Avenue and Madison. Here you see it located north side of the street. It's unusual in that many of these houses were a row of Italianate houses that had facades added to them approximately 4 or 5 feet out from the original row. These all got built in the early 20th century. This appears to have been one of the last ones. And as it's post-depression, it's 1930, it was converted into apartment houses. And so it's an interesting facade in that it has steel windows, but it is neo-federal, simplified in the designation. Our proposal is to extend one opening on the ground floor into a door and to replace the steel sash windows with new steel sash windows. Here is the existing context today. Interestingly, Gross and Schwartz were the architects of the adjacent building as well, the one to the east. Existing and proposed conditions on the ground floor, we're proposing to take the easternmost opening, drop the sill in order to create a symmetrical door. The house is going from a 5-unit apartment house into a 2-family house. And so this both makes it more functional, but also is in line with other modifications and other facades from this era that have matching doors in their facades. Next. Up close, existing and proposed. Again, the doors will be similar. The opening simply takes that spandrel of brick underneath the sill and lowers it down. Existing context photographs. Materials, it's going to use, well, it's going to be removing the brick and we're going to be putting in steel sash windows. For context, here are some precedent examples. The first one is a Neo-Georgian house in the district. Again, 2 identical matching doorways, about a symmetrically facade. 14 East 81st is in the Metropolitan Historic District. Again, this is 2 matching doors, one primary, secondary. Within the district on the next block, 42 East 74th, a neo-federal house, again, 2 identical openings about the ground floor. 2 more examples, one just outside of the district here with 2 identical openings, and then one again within the district, 59 East 76th, a non-style building, showing again 2 identical openings at the front facade. Here, go to this. There's another example, unfortunately, I don't think is in this presentation, where Schwartz and Gross did a neo-federal house 2 years before this house, which is, or this building, which is dated 1930, which has symmetrically placed doors just as we are proposing. So it was not only stylistically common and popular amongst the era, also these architects themselves were playing with it when the function of the building allowed for that. This shows examples of ironwork in the district that we are proposing. These are the existing windows. The existing windows are puttied, single glazed steel sash windows. All of them have been modified to include an air conditioner, a window mounted air conditioner. We are proposing to replace them with thermally broken insulated glazing and to have no penetrations in them for air conditioners. Again, existing conditions of these windows. Existing and proposed. When we go to the thermally broken window, we end up with larger joints between the meeting portions of the sash. This system is very nice, the one that we're proposing. It's set up in such a way that both the hinged and the meeting sections are the same dimension. In the existing, there's a difference between with the meeting section and the hinge section. The bottom line is that if we try to replace exactly the same pattern, we end up significantly reducing the amount of glazed opening because the size of the steel members is now slightly larger and incrementally ends up eating a lot of the light. And so the proposal that we're making is to keep the transom idea as it's there, keep the same number of sash, and then eliminate the interior muntins in order to facilitate a bit more daylight, given that we're bringing in these new and slightly larger dimension windows.
So does this company not offer a simulated true divided light arrangement?
The horizontal portion that you see there is an SDL. It's actually, it's not so much the SDL issue, it's actually the operable portions of it. So both the hinged and the meeting portions are what gets thick and clunky. This is a system by Optimum. These are some examples of steel windows from the period. This 1936 building, just around the corner in the district. The building is Art Deco, but again, one sees here, even within the period, much larger panes of glass for these steel window systems. This is officially a no-style building, quite a funky building, showing both its tax photo and the current condition, showing again within the period a large size sash for the glazing. Sections which I don't think are really relevant. Go back. Here. So this is the proposal, existing and proposed. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions? All right, we'll go to public testimony. We may have questions after that. And as always, we'll begin with anyone who signed up in advance. So we're going to start on this one with Laura Varale.
Good morning. Laura Varale, representing Friends of the Upper East Side Historic Districts. Chair Carroll and Honorable Commissioners. 19 East 74th Street is one of the many 19th century Italianate townhouses that were altered in the beginning of the 20th century and are an essential part of the historic district's character and significance. Unfortunately, over the past years, we have seen far too many proposals to strip off historic details and significantly alter the building styles. We're pleased to see that this is not the case in this proposal and that the applicant is maintaining the masonry details and modest character of the 1930 facade. Friends is not opposed to the additional door on the ground floor, especially considering the history of secondary basement doors on the facades of the designed row houses. We believe the newly designed door ironwork to be appropriate. However, we don't understand the desire to alter the transom design, let alone to have two different styles of transom. The existing design suits the proposed door ironwork and should be replicated on the new door opening. Finally, Friends Preservation Committee takes issue with the proposed steel casement windows. While we can't recommend the replacement of significant historic material when restoration is a viable option, we understand the changing needs of energy efficiency. We recognize the applicant's effort to propose multi-panels. However, we believe it isn't enough. Small multi-panes such as are a key element of the colonial revival design, and the proposed change is substantial. Going from 8 panes to only 2 per sash and transom will significantly alter the look of this townhouse and diminish its historic character. We ask that the applicant work with the commission to find a better compromise between energy efficiency and historic details and come up with a solution with more subdivisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Simeon Bancroft.
Historic Districts Council. HDC finds this proposal to have several laudable elements, especially the opening to the ground floor and the bulkhead. However, the proposed windows are a completely different style than the current historic ones. We ask the applicant to respect the original design of the windows, specifically the loss of the intermediate muntins changes the visual profile of the fenestration. Our personal window experts tell me that family broken windows which reasonably match the existing configuration are available, and we strongly suggest that you use them here.
Thank you. John Graham?
Good morning, Commissioners. John Graham for the VSNY. This late neo-federal house has two things going for it: the delightful triple arch ground floor and the large, elegant, multi-light steel casement windows. VSNY thinks the change to the ground floor, converting the window to a door, is appropriate, as it would remove minimal historic material, would actually enhance the symmetry, and is a typical configuration of the ground floor of houses of this age and style. However, assuming the ironwork at the existing door is original to the 1930 alteration, and this is shown in a photo on board 7, it should be retained and either replicated at the new door, or a simplified version could be installed at the new secondary entrance. The windows are another matter. The loss of the texture of these small pane, multi-light casements, not to mention all of this historic material, would be devastating to the architectural integrity and character of the house. While it might be possible to match the configuration with new double-glazed steel or aluminum windows, we've yet to see a truly successful example of this, despite some valiant efforts. The proportions and detailings are never the same, and the elegance and character of the originals are lost. We know that since the building is to be centrally air-conditioned, and then the likelihood that the windows will be open frequently is small, and secondary interior sash could be installed to address energy conservation and comfort in this location. Thank you very much, Commissioners.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Okay, and I'll just note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 8 voted to approve this application as presented. Would you like to respond to the comments?
Yes, thank you. It is difficult in the tax photograph to see if the existing ironwork that's there is the original. It's all kind of shadowy, both in the designation and the tax photograph. So our proposal is, again, based on examples in the district, and I think also are more secure in that they provide full coverage across the glazed opening, as opposed to maintaining a large portion of unsecured glazed opening on the door. Relative to the windows, I believe that this is both appropriate and a pragmatic approach to a steel window replacement, given the change in dimensions. Thank you.
All right, and just a follow-up question on that. I understand with the change in dimensions that you felt that the original configuration would get just too thick. The framing members would be too thick and the panes too small. Did you study something that would have maybe fewer panes than the original, but more panes than what you're proposing?
That's a really interesting question. It had to do with the fact that we wanted to preserve the geometry of the four-partate division. And we felt that this was the subtraction within that original geometry to us felt like the more appropriate move to respect that geometry.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? No? Okay, so I think we'll make a motion to close the hearing. Commissioner Chen, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. There are two components here, the converting the window to a door and the replacement of windows. Commissioner Holford Smith, would you start this one?
Sure. I think the addition of the door is appropriate. It maintains the symmetry of the facade, and it looks like it was always there. I think the ironwork looks appropriate as well. The windows are another matter. I think that the simplicity of the facade requires the the more granular detail of the steel windows. So I think that they should, if they can't replicate the exact pattern, then it should be, at least an increased number of muntins. And perhaps there could be, I don't know if it's a different model of this window or if they have fewer sections that are operable so that they can sort of decrease the width of the mullions in between. And then add more muntins to make it
Okay,
much more appropriate.
great. Thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I basically agree I think the door and the ironwork are fine. I feel that the existing multi-light windows really do contribute to the sense of this building. And I think that the proposed replacement windows just are not accomplishing the same purpose. So Commissioner Holbert-Smith made some suggestions about how that might be improved if they can't replace them as they are, to come to something that is much more evocative of the original.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Thank you. Can you go to page 3? Thanks. And what's striking for me here is that unlike in the render and the elevation, which I'm sure is accurate, the impression that's given by the industrial window, which, I mean, if there was ever a proto-Stephen Harris job, it's this one, is the texture, the uniformity, the kind of industrial quality of that window, the proportion of it, and where the vertical segments, the four-part design is less prominent, is certainly not something that is being foregrounded by the design. So I agree with Ann that making the 2 central ones, for instance, into a larger picture, that it's fixed, or going to tripartite instead of quadripartite, and thus minimizing the number of fat mullions, anything to get that texture back. I think one of the things that for me makes the connection between this and the context is the close relationship between the building here and the building to the left. Another Schwartz and Gross building. It's very analogous. That scale is very much there. So I think we have to hold on to that. I agree with everyone about the doors and metalwork at the lower level.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with my colleagues. I think about the symmetry, I think that makes it more symmetrical. There's a very nice balance. It's a very symmetrical building. And Michael's comments and Ann's comments are well taken.
Okay, Commissioner Jefferson.
I agree with the comments of my fellow commissioners.
Okay, Commissioner Gustafson.
I have nothing to add. I agree, other than to state my appreciation for killing the through window air conditioners, which really does bring back the look of the 1940 tax photo.
Okay. All right. I think we will take no action on this one, only because if they explore a different configuration, I think it may be, again, where we would want to weigh kind of what's important, the kind of parts that it's divided into, or the muntins. So I think rather than leaving it to the staff, we'll take no action, and we'll ask you to rethink the fenestration to try to achieve something that is more evocative of the scale and texture of the original windows.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Okay, we're going to move to item number 5, LPC 21-06253, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1905, lot 54. 146 West 121st Street in the Mount Morris Park Historic District Extension. This is a neo-Gothic style row house designed by Bartlett, Smith and Sons and built circa 1886 to 87. The application is to construct a rear yard addition. This was previously advertised also with an extension of a chimney, and that has been determined to be eligible for staff level review.
Okay, please go ahead.
My name is Jeff Sherman. I'm the architect for this project. My understanding is that it's really the rear extension that you're concerned with, so I may jump through some things that aren't relevant. You can see the existing donut. That's our building on the upper left there. Series of other buildings with similar rear extensions. And bird's eye photos showing the neighbors' extensions. And this is the neighbor directly to the west of us with an axon of the extension that they've done, which is quite a bit larger actually than ours. And this is the extension that we're planning, a 3-story extension with a deck and a stair. Pause on this for a moment just to see. Look around front of the building, and this is the existing rear. There's a small single-story rear extension that we're demolishing, and then you see our 3-story extension with the deck at the parlor floor, and that is not an occupiable deck. That's at the top of our rear extension. And the lintels will be precast to match the existing lintels. It says steel on this, but it's that'll be precast. The section showing our new extension there on the rear. That's the existing additions to the rear of the building. Detail of our fenestration. The lower windows, the large panel on the lower left there is an anti-wall system that accordions open completely. Other windows on the rear. And plans of the house. And that's it for the drawings. I welcome your questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? All right, we might have more questions after public testimony, so we'll move to testimony now. Simeon Bancroft.
Good morning, Commissioners. Simeon Bancroft, Historic Districts Council. HDC strongly recommends the proposed addition be lowered by 1 story. The current plan overwhelms the back of this fairly narrow house. The awkwardness of the large addition is further emphasized by the off-center glazing of the sliding doors and windows. Although it would mean sacrificing the double height atrium proposed to fill back the house, reducing the height of this addition would much better serve the character of this 135-year-old building and its neighbors.
Thank you. Is anyone else who'd like to speak on this item? All right, and I'll note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 10 submitted a resolution approving the application as presented. Would you like to respond to the comments about the height in connection with, or in the context of the other additions in the block and the asymmetrical nature of the glazing?
Oh, yes. Well, about the height, I just wanted to show that our height is not dissimilar from a lot of the heights of other extensions in that donut. So it doesn't seem like it would be overwhelming any context. In terms of the asymmetry of the glazing, I guess that's an aesthetic preference, and so I won't even get into our design.
Any final questions? All right, Commissioner Holford-Smith, would you make a motion to close the hearing? So moved. Commissioner Gustafson, would you second it?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And so this is a rear yard addition. As the applicant has presented, there are other I think this is on the legend as three-story, lots of other three-story rear yard additions within the donut. It does have a double height opening at the parlor and second floor, and I think just 2 weeks ago, we approved another one with a double height opening at the sort of parlor and second floor as opposed to the first floor. And in terms of the asymmetrical opening, it's kind of interesting. I think we have approved others that are asymmetrical, and sometimes we have done it to sort of evoke the L's, the configuration of the L's. So that's something to think about as we comment. Commissioner Chapin, would you start this one?
Okay. I don't think that the addition is excessive. I think it's reasonable in the context of others, which may not be full width, but there's certainly a lot of extensions that are this large, and it's really that lower floor is actually not a full floor above ground, so it's really like 2.5, so I think it's really quite appropriate as far as the size. I'm not, see what other commissioners have to say. I'm not particularly troubled by the offset fenestration pattern. I'm okay with that.
Okay, thank you. And also, I just want to confirm this is not visible from a public way, correct? Okay. All right, Commissioner Goldblum?
I agree. It's a little curious, but I think it's appropriate.
Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Chapin and Michael as well. I think it's appropriate, and I think it's not excessive in size.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
I'm torn on this one. I can accept the height of the volume, but I think if you go back to your elevation,
I'm sorry.
your elevation.
Oh, yes.
The amount of glass is so much, and it's asymmetrical, which makes it contrasting with the rest of the building. I would accept that volume if you kept the windows that you have on the third, the fourth, and fifth floor on that volume, so it becomes like a clear story light coming in to your double-story space. But to have that much glass, I find it too much.
Commissioner Gustafson?
I think it's appropriate, as is, reminding myself that the question is not whether it's the most appropriate option, but whether it is an appropriate option. The asymmetry of the glazing is a little disturbing, but that doesn't make it inappropriate, so I'm okay with it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Hoffman Smith?
I agree. I was at first sort of put off by the asymmetry, but I think it's fine. And I think the amount of glazing is what we've approved in the past, so.
Okay. All right, great. So I think we have 6 to support it. So Commissioner Chapin, would you go ahead and make the motion?
In the matter of a certificate of appropriateness, Borough of Manhattan, LPC 21-06253-146, West 121st Street, Morris Park Historic District Extension. A neo-Gothic style row house designed by Bartlett Smith and Sons and built circa 1886 to 1887. Application is to construct a rear yard addition and extended chimney. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Mount Morris Park Historic District Extension. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not eliminate or damage any significant architectural features, that the proposed 3-story rear yard addition will not be visible from any public thoroughfare, that the proposed rear addition will be clad in brick and will feature a black finished metal double height window assembly with a spandrel between floors, helping to maintain the residential scale and character of the building and below. That the addition will not rise to the full height of the building, thereby maintaining a sense of the building's original scale and massing, and that the addition will not project further into the rear yard than other existing rear additions at this block, and will not diminish the presence of the rear yard or the central green space.
Commissioner Goldblum, would you second the motion?
Second.
Thanks. John, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin. Aye. Commissioner Chen. Aye. Commissioner Godu. Aye. Commissioner Gustafson. Aye. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
6 in favor, 1 opposed, the motion carries.
Okay, thank you. So that's approved. And please continue to talk to the staff. All right, so we are so efficient this month that we're on schedule, and the next applicants are not here yet. So we will break for lunch now, and we'll come back at 12:15. And we'll ask the members of the public to either sit in our overflow room or get some fresh air, since it will be a 45-minute break.